Brown on your right. He is playing Blue-Red Omnitel, and you might be familiar with Max, obviously, from his token, as well as winning Last Invitational in Las Vegas. But also, when he plays this deck, he does very well. Last Invitational in Las Vegas, 6-0-2 with it.
Very good legacy record, playing the same build. His opponent, Dwayne Graham, playing Merfolk. Traditionally a deck that capitalizes on the combo decks of the format, a mixture of a good clock and some disruption like Force of Will and Daze. Traditionally gives it a good matchup against combo decks.
Dwayne just plays the Mutavault and passes the turn back as we are underway, round 1 of 16. We appreciate you guys joining us all weekend long. Of course, today, Patrick, 8 rounds of action for Legacy 4 Standard. Tomorrow, we'll do the same thing for Legacy 4 Standard. We'll also cover our Standard Open a little bit. And then on Sunday, that's where the fun begins. We start Sunday with the elimination rounds of our Standard Open. Then we do the elimination rounds of our Invitational. Then we finish out the Legacy Open. I guess we'll call it quits then.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that the Opens this weekend are actually the start of Season 2.
Correct.
So all this point race we've been doing this entire time, that's starting again this weekend for the Season 2 invites.
Max going to cast a Ponder, get things started off by setting up. He's looking at a Brainstorm among other blue cards. If you're not familiar with Omnitel, it's pretty much like Show and Tell. There's a little bit of different stuff going on here. You might be wondering what the red is for, which is Burning Wish, which gives Max a virtual 7 copies of Show and Tell. Show and Tell, if that does resolve, we'll put in Omniscience in play. All your spells are free. You can pretty much do whatever you want from there. Max will be using, of course, Enter the Infinite. Burning Wish may be to search for Enter the Infinite or something else in his sideboard. Or maybe he'll draw his 1 Emrakul, cast that for free, and go from there. But the big goal here is to resolve a Show and Tell, get Omniscience into play.
Yeah, and Dream Halls gives you a way to supplement that plan.
Yes.
As you see, Dwayne a little slow out of the gates here, just attacking with Mutavault.
And, you know, this is one of the problems. The Merfolk deck, as powerful as this Pack Rat-esque strategy can be, you know, he does play 12 islands, in this case 11, along with a Cavern of Souls, 4 Mutavaults, and 4 Wastelands. So you can have some difficulty putting double blue together. As here is our first of many of one of your favorite cards in the format, Gataxian Probe.
I love it. In a format where cheap spells are premium for a variety of reasons, be it Snapcaster Mage, Delver of Secrets, Grim Lavamancer, what have you, and the format is so fast and predicated on information, Gataxian Probe does a lot of good work.
Graham's hand, he has a Force of Will, a Lord of Atlantis, a Phantasmal Image, and another copy of Mutavault. But the big problem here is that no double blue. Even though Force of Will is quite good, won't be able to defend himself all that great while trying to apply pressure, which is what this deck's, you know, kind of hallmark is.
Yeah, exactly. Get a clock into play, and then use your soft permission or Force of Wills to keep your opponent off of whatever they're trying to assemble just long enough.
Brown going to sacrifice the Scalding Tarn, go get himself a basic mountain. We'll see where he's going to go from here. As far as Burning Wish targets are concerned, because he may be casting that this turn, he's got some nice ones, actually. He has an Eye of Nowhere, a Time of Need, obviously Show and Tell, along with Enter the Infinite hanging out over there. A couple copies of Pyroclasm, a Tremor.
Ooh.
Do you know what that one is?
Isn't that deal 1 to all creatures?
For how many mana?
For a single red.
Okay, very good. I'm checking your knowledge here. And then this is going to be the fun one. As you see, Graham's going to take a look at Burning Wish. We'll do the same so you guys can basically understand what this card does. Let you search your sideboard, go get a sorcery out of there. Another one, now I'm going to be impressed if you know this one, Spiraling Embers.
I do not know that one off the top of my head.
All right, Spiraling Embers. I'm going to guess that this is a guess. 3 colorless, 1 red. Sorcery deals damage equal to the number of cards in your hand to target creature or player. We'll bring it up. We'll bring up Spiraling Embers to check, see who's right here. I feel like I might be wrong. It's been a long time since I've played Kamigawa Block, which, to be fair, was a pretty fun format. Spiraling Embers on the screen, please.
So Dwayne again across with his Mutavault. Max with Show and Tell in hand that he got off his Burning Wish last turn.
Curse Catcher will make it a little bit more difficult. And there it is.
Nice.
Did I get it right?
Yeah, you did.
Yes! Yes! That was actually like a pretty good removal spell in that format.
Yep.
Also because it was arcane, but I'm kind of dating myself a little bit here as Max is going to cast another copy of Burning Wish. We'll see what he's going to search out here. Maybe it will be the Embers.
And Embers is a really nice removal spell, of course, once you have played Omniscience and Enter the Infinites, as it can kill essentially any creature you can imagine.
Or them.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sweet, actually.
Yep.
I can dig that. As you see, Max searches up the old Enter the Infinite right there. Expensive, not looking to actually hardcast that, but once Omniscience is in play, or Dream Halls, assuming he has the right hand, he can cast that and just kind of do his thing. As Graham is going to untap here with that Curse Catcher. We know he has Force of Will. He's got a Lord of Atlantis, but only a single island out there, and he's applying a sufficient amount of pressure, I would say, with the Mutavaults. It's not great, but I'd argue it's good enough.
Yeah, as hung up as we've been on all the stuff that Max is doing right now, for lacking double blue, Dwayne is really keeping his head above water right now. He's got a reasonable clock going. He has a Curse Catcher and a Force of Will in hand as disruption. So and now you see a second Curse Catcher, and this is sort of the Merfolk game plan. Of course, he would like to find a second blue mana, start getting some of his lords in play and increasing his clock, but for the time being, he is putting on a reasonable amount of pressure and preventing Max from doing exactly what he wants to do.
And running Curse Catchers is actually going to make things kind of difficult because with Graham also having a Force Will in his hand, those Curse Catchers are going to act as virtual counter spells.
Yeah, this is the squeeze. You know, Max needs to cast his spells on time and quickly because he doesn't have all the time in the world, but Curse Catcher puts a lot of pressure on that game plan as well.
And Curse Catcher is also kind of sweet because it allows Graham to actually kind of tap out and not fear days because he can lead with Force of Will and whatever. And then, you know, let's say, for example, Max casts a Show and Tell, Dwayne Force of Wills it, and then, you know, then you can start actually sacrificing the Curse Catchers to get the job done. Because I think he would want to use the Curse Catchers last because they're providing a clock.
Absolutely. And you're seeing a lot of the power of Curse Catcher in Legacy right now. It's a fairly innocuous card, and if you haven't played much of the format, it's easy to sort of look at this as a necessary evil in the deck. But the format is so fast, and there are so many cheap spells that essentially read, you win the game on them if they resolve. Curse Catcher plays a critical role in allowing an honest deck like Merfolk to compete with a really powerful, unfair strategy like the one that Max is incorporating.
You see, Max just plays a Misty Rainforest and has to pass the turn back. So often mocked as the Curse Catcher, but actually quite good right now as Graham draws, it looks like another copy of Phantasmal Image. So you see his hand of 2 images of Force of Will and a Lord of Atlantis. Doesn't have double blue, but he might be interested in potentially imaging one of those Curse Catchers.
I think so too. Phantasmal Image is a pretty cool addition to the Merfolk strategy. Of course, it's good at copying your own lords. You can just copy Lord of Atlantis or Master of the Pearl Trine if the game gets that point. Also, against certain show and tell strategies, being able to copy whatever they're putting into play is valuable as well.
Graham's going to activate a Mutavault and then cast Phantasmal Image. It looks like with the idea of copying a Mutavault. We'll see exactly what he did copy. We'll check with our table spotter here to ensure that, did he copy Mutavault or did he actually care about copying Curse Catcher? But he goes with Mutavault, and what this allows him to do is actually just have another land in play.
Yeah.
So Brown considering sacrificing a Misty Rainforest. If he does that, he's going to go down to 6. 6 is a dangerous number with 2 Mutavaults and 2 Curse Catchers in play. That'll be 6 pretty easily. So he's going to get an island. I think we're going to see the big turn here.
Yeah, he's got to go for it now because it's not getting any easier. Max also has to be conscious of the fact that Dwayne is without a second blue mana right now, which is preventing certain cards from being cast, like the Lord of Atlantis he knows about. So he's under a lot of pressure right now, and it's likely to get worse if Dwayne is able to find a second blue mana.
The other thing, too, with that Phantasmal Image being a Mutavault, don't forget it is a land that can tap for mana. With it being a Mutavault, it can tap for mana and maybe get around to days, in case that does come up. Max's deck list does have 2 of those. We're going to see a Brainstorm here on the end step. Max is going to go a little deeper. There's a Scalding Tarn, there's a Volcanic Island, there's a Lotus Petal. Lotus Petal actually pretty important along with those lands because that'll give him another mana source to force through these Curse Catchers. Brown's going to untap, he's going to take a draw. There is the Volcanic Island, and now we're going to see the big fireworks and see if he can get it through.
And this is a very common play pattern you see in Legacy. A couple turns of setup from a combo deck and then a lot of fireworks.
A little surprised not to see him casting Lotus Petal right away. There it is. That's going to come into play. We're not going to have a fight over that. We're going to have a fight over the Show and Tell that a Burning wished for many moons ago. And Graham knows that, and he's at the ready as well. Here is Show and Tell from our defending Invitational champion. Will it resolve is the big question.
And you can see him getting Dream Halls ready right now.
Yeah. It's not an Omniscience, but it doesn't have to be.
Correct.
So Graham considering his options. He's looking at Force of Will, blue card, also those Curse Catchers, but those Curse Catchers have gotten a little bit worse, so that's going to resolve. No fight over this.
This is gutsy.
Yes. Dream Halls comes into play, as does Phantasmal Image. We'll see what Image is going to copy. It'll be Curse Catcher.
So Dream Halls essentially gives everything Force of Will casting cost. You can discard a card of the same color to play any card for free. The effect is symmetrical. Keep that in mind as well.
Yep.
If Dwayne's able to get to his turn, even if he doesn't find another blue mana, he may be able to simply alternate casting costs a Lord of Atlantis and kill Max that way.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned is that this effect is symmetrical enough. If you're not familiar with Dream Halls, and with good reason, because it's a rather old card. It doesn't play a huge role in Legacy. Really, just this deck is where you're going to find Dream Halls at. Some people might not know that it's symmetrical. Some people might not know that, hey, I can just move this Force Will to actually cast a Lord of Atlantis, or vice versa. I can remove this Lord of Atlantis to cast a Force Will, not take one, for example.
Yeah.
So with the copying of Curse Catcher here, now of course Brown spells are going to be free, But still, Brown knows that Graham has Force of Will and a blue card. He knows that. And so this is where things get a little bit more difficult for him. Because he doesn't have a ton of blue cards in his hand. You can see his hand right now. You see a Brainstorm. There's an Enter the Infinite. There's a Force of Will. And there's a land. Let's say he removes that Brainstorm for the Enter the Infinite, which he's going to do. The Force of Will from Graham will actually get the job done.
Yep. And if Dwayne wasn't really willing to fight over Show and Tell, which was a pretty aggressive line that he took here, I would imagine that he's going to fight over put your deck in your hand.
I think I'm inclined to agree with you. As Graham is looking at those last two cards, it's a Force of Will. There is the Lord of Atlantis being removed to that. We'll see how he casts it, if he takes one or not. But hey, the guy's at 9. The guy's at 20.
Yeah.
He might not understand Dream Halls all the way, but that's going to get countered. Force of Will from Graham is going to get the job done there. He passes the turn back, does go to 19, but not a big deal because 19's not zeros. Graham is going to draw his card. He's going to play an island. He's going to activate a Mutavault. He's going to activate another Mutavault. It's red zone time. Everybody coming in. Outside of that one Mutavault, that is obviously, outside of that one Phantasmal Mutavault, Mutavault. But either way, going to get the job done. Dwayne Graham does win game number 1 here of round 1 of our Season 1 Invitational. Up a game of the defending champ.
Yeah, and a really good matchup for Dwayne here. You saw it looked as though he mulliganed at least once that game. Never found double blue, but the mixture of Curse Catchers, Mutavaults, and Force of Will, enough to keep Max barely off of being able to assemble his combo. And that's the critical thing to understand about Merfolk. It's very rarely winning by a lot. When it's winning games, it's usually just holding on long enough to deal 20 points of damage. You saw Dwayne execute that game plan to perfection in game 1.
That's the definition of holding on that last game.
Yes, barely holding on.
Yes, a real sweat, but able to get the job done. As we're going to take a look at sideboards, as we always do here in the booth. Going to start with Max Brown's, which I do have in front of me. We went over some of the Burning Wish targets against Spiraling Embers, Eye of Nowhere, Time of Need, Show and Tell, which we saw Brown wish for, as well as Enter the Infinite. There's also 2 copies of Pyroclasm, which even though there are multiple copies of that, you think he might want to leave one to wish for, maybe not. He might bring both of those in. But some of the more important cards here, 2 copies of Red Elemental Blast, 1 copy of Pyroblast. Obviously a lot of usefulness in this particular matchup. There's also Jace the Mind Sculptor, the Tremor that we talked about, and then 3 copies of Leyline of Sanctity against the discard decks. I expect Max to maybe board in one of the Pyroclasms, leave one to wish for, but potentially bring in both, and then a Pyroblast and 2 copies of Red Elemental Blast.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a non-intuitive concept, but it may be better for Max to bring in both copies of Pyroclasm rather than leave one to wish for, because he's going to be, in general, pretty happy to draw Pyroclasm, but it may be too slow for him to wish for. And once Dwayne is also armed with the information that Max is tutored for Pyroclasm, he can also try to sculpt his line of play around it. Yeah. So even though Pyroclasm may be his most powerful Burning Wish target, Max may be better served by simply bringing both of his in. On the Merfolk side, we have a Manriki Gasari, a Mindbreak Trap, 3 Relic Progenitus, a Numazawa's Jite, Akira, Great Glass Spinner, 2 Swan Songs, a Spell Pierce, 2 Chain of Vapors, a Lawan Cephalid Empress, and a Pithing Needle. I would expect the Spell Pierce and the 2 Swan Songs to come in. The rest of his sideboard is not really well suited for this matchup. It's possible he believes he gets some value out of, say, bringing in something like Chain of Vapor to fight over Dream Halls in the event that it is actually able to sneak into play. I'm not a huge fan of those kind of answers, as it's often not going to be sufficient, but I certainly like the additional counter spells in Spell Pierce and Swan Song.
Taking a look at our leaderboard here very briefly for you guys. As far as names who are in attendance here, we have quite a few, Mr. Sullivan. Obviously, our top 5 players are here. Brian Braun, William Jensen, Brad Nelson, Chris Van Meter, Eric Smith. Number 6, Gerard Fabiano. He didn't make the trip, unfortunately. But hey, when you win a Grand Prix, I think you can take a week off.
Living high off the hog after his Grand Prix win. Congratulations to Gerard.
Andrew Tenjamin, 7th. Max Teets in 8th. Owen Turtenwald in 9th. Jeff Hooglin in 10th. Kevin Jones, 11. Reed Duke, 12. Todd Anderson, 13. Jim Davis, 14. Jacob Wilson, also living high off the hog, as you put it, after getting 2nd place in the last Pro Tour. And then Eric Rill, 16th place. And I'd be remiss not to shout out Andrew Shroud, who's in 17th. And if he could play, I promise you he would.
Oh, absolutely. Not only giving up his invitational slot, but an invitational bye as well for round 1 to work in the sideboard with us this weekend.
So, again, we're going to have a lot of fantastic Magic to watch this weekend. I mean, this doesn't even mention a lot of the people who obviously aren't in the top 16, but fantastic Magic players like Joe Lissette, Rudy Briscoe, Jared Betcher, who is about as hot as any Magic player right now.
He's on a heater.
Yeah, top 8 at Grand Prix Cincinnati, 9th place at the last Pro Tour. Obviously has a win on the Open Series with Sneak and Show. Runner-up at Grand Prix Washington, D.C. Lost to Owen Turtwell in the finals playing Sneak and Show. Ross Merriam, you've got Jack Fogle, Justin Uppel, Joe Bernal, Max Brown, who obviously we're watching right now, Harry Corvasi, Kent Ketter, who really made a name for himself so far this year with just a really nice run with different Monsters variants, 2 losses in the finals, also additional top 8 in the Open Series. Shaheen Soorani, who likely, you think maybe Esper this week?
I would guess probably Red Beatdown in Standard and Jund in Legacy. No,
Okay.
it's gonna be counterspells in both formats.
Okay, I think maybe a blue-white duel
Yeah.
in each of his decks. AJ Soccer, who we haven't seen for a little while, he's out playing. Tyler Wilkerson, Mr. Almost Back-to-Back in Orlando. He made the trip up from Atlanta. Matt Costa, a name I haven't seen for a little bit. Tom the Boss Ross, who you can expect to be playing Blue-Green Infect today in the Legacy portion, so hopefully we'll have some time to watch him. Justin Parnell. Michael Majors, who we watched at Grand Prix Richmond play Storm very, very well every time he was on camera. And then some names who aren't on our top 100 because they don't get to come out that much, but we'll get to watch Sam Black, Shahar Shenhar, Dave Shields, who was the runner-up at the last limited Grand Prix before losing to Gerard, Corey McDuffie, and John Cuvier. So I think maybe we might have some okay Magic this week.
Yeah, for sure. And Jarrett Betcher is really the name that I'm most intrigued by out of that list of players that you just mentioned, because he's a player where I feel like his sort of, whatever you want to call it, his mystique or his respect from his peers has not caught up to his results. He's been on a tear the last couple of months, top 8ing a bunch of premier level events, and with another good performance this weekend, I think he's finally going to get the visibility he deserves from the run he's been putting up recently.
Yeah, been absolutely dealing recently.
Oh yeah, and he's a player that I think is still relatively anonymous in the community, and he has been killing it lately.
He's young too, 21, 22 years old. Absolutely just slicing and dicing his way through premier level events. We'll turn our attention back here, though. Dwayne Graham, Max Brown, game number 2. Max looks like he wants to play an island, but he's not too sure. He's the defending invitational champion. He will play that island. He's going to play Gitaxian Prove. It's info time. There's 2 islands, Phantasmal Image, Merfolk Reachery, a Silvergill Adept, a Force of Will, and a Spell Pierce.
This is a really solid Merfolk hand. Of course, Dwayne would really like to have Aether Vial. It's the marquee card of this deck. But you can see he has a path of being able to get some pressure with Silvergill Adept and Phantasmal Image, and actually hold off Max at the same time with the Spell Pierce and Force of Will.
That's what the draw step's for, Patrick.
Yeah.
You draw the Aether Vial. It's perfect. You see, Brown does have an Ancient Tomb in his hand. He's going to start by playing a Ponder, also with a Brainstorm, but we'll watch Max decide if he wants to keep these 3 cards. This is obviously going to kind of sculpt the way that the game goes if he does keep them.
And this is the upside of playing the blue combo decks in Legacy. They're usually a little bit on the slower side, certainly compared to something like Goblin Charbelcher that's capable of winning on turn 1 a reasonable percentage of the time. But that trade-off, you get a lot more stability, and you're seeing Max start off here with a lot of cantrips, fixing his hand, getting information about what's going on in Dwayne's hand. These are all very valuable things to be doing as Max tries to assemble his kill.
Shuffling it with Ponder, so Mystery card is a coming. How do you feel about Omnitel kind of in the format right now? We haven't really seen over Season 1 of the Open Series Show and Tell-esque decks, do really well.
Yeah, I do like the build that Max is playing, as it's a little less susceptible to Wasteland. Certainly not in the same way that Mono Blue Omnitel is, because he still has Volcanic Islands alongside of his, Ancient Tombs and City of Traders, but you get a lot more stability against decks where their primary form of disruption against you is Wasteland.
Curse Catcher there from Graham is how he'll start things off. You saw Brown pick up a Force Will off the Ponder. Now he's going to play a Brainstorm in the main phase. That's going to resolve. I promise he's going to have to pay mana for that, and he does. Brainstorm is already good enough. You're going to have to pay the 1.
Yeah, you do have to. It's the best spell in the format by quite the margin, but still does cost 1 mana. And that Curse Catcher from Dwayne that he drew on his first draw step really is the last piece that his hand needs to be excellent. Yep. He had something to do on turn 1, piece of disruption, and of course increases his clock as well.
Saw Max pick up an Omniscience and Enter the Infinite and a land. He's going to figure out how to put cards back with this Brainstorm here before continuing his turn. It looks like he's working his way towards something powerful, but he wasn't able to get it through last game. We'll see if he can this game. But as you mentioned, Graham's hand is very good, and that Curse Catcher off the top kind of solidified it.
Yeah, that was the last thing that he needed. Tapping out on the second turn to get his Silvergill Adept into play is a little bit risky. It means he doesn't have access to Spell Pierce, but now with that Curse Catcher in play, he has a little bit more insurance alongside his Force Will. He can start tapping out to get his board developed, and then hold up counterspells for the rest of the game to keep Max off of assembling his combo.
It's all about pressure and disruption with Merfolk, which Graham has both of right now. Brown's going to have to overcome this. He does have a Force of Will. He's working his way towards the combo, does resolve the Brainstorm. Graham will take a draw. It's a Master of the Pearl Trident, so Crusade effects, he's got plenty of them. There's an island. Here's an attack for 1. Brown going to go down to 17.
These Merfolk strategies are really flush with tribal lords, Master of the Pearl Trident, Lord of Atlantis, and Marrow Regery.
Silvergill Adept going to go Cantrippin. Phantasmal Image, I promise you can't show. That's not a Merfolk, even though most of the time it is. Marrow Regery is a Merfolk. So, it is time to draw a card in a moment. I assume he picked one up.
Yeah. Possible he missed the trigger there?
Yeah. It looks like he did miss the trigger on actually drawing a card.
Yeah.
A touch awkward, but still doing just fine.
Yeah. Dwayne's still got a lot of tools to work with this game.
And you can see his hand, Master of the Pearl Trident, Marrow Regery, Phantasmal Image, Spell Pierce, and a Force of Will. If you could draw one up for the Merfolk deck, this might be it.
Yep. For a hand that is missing Aether Vial, this is about as good as a hand can get.
Yeah. Brown going to sacrifice that blue to Delta. He's going to go down to, I believe, 16, maybe a little bit lower. But, of course, going to make sure that the Brainstorm stuff is gone, draw an island for the turn.
You can see Max's hand here, not that susceptible to Wasteland, which is important for him. He does have his basic mountain. He has an Ancient Tomb. But he's probably going to want to use that Ancient Tomb only the turn he's actually trying to go off.
And Wasteland the draw.
And this is a critical decision point for Dwayne. Does he simply copy his Silvergill Adept with the Phantasmal Image and leave up Spell Pierce? Or does he tap out for Regery for maximum clock, or another Lord like Master, and leave the shields down on his Spell Pierce?
Yeah, I mean, he's got actually a lot of options this turn. He's just going to play the Master and attack here for 5, 3 from the Silvergill, 2 from the Curse Catcher. He could also copy the Curse Catcher, which we saw was very powerful in the last game, leave up Spell Pierce, potentially leave up Wasteland as well. One thing that you did mention is that this Omnitel deck, even though it's not, it's susceptible to Wasteland a little bit, this particular version. The mono blue one obviously does quite well, but in the current board position that we're in, and the way Max has searched out his lands, he's doing great against Wasteland, obviously. So he's going to play another basic island.
Yeah, critical for these decks to be able to play around Wasteland, as, again, it's the most common form of disruption that honest decks have against you.
Graham going to tap 2. There's a Phantasmal Image. We'll see what that's going to go copying. It will be Master of the Pearl Trident.
And it was really critical last turn for Dwayne to get out of Max's turn still alive, of course, as now he gets to put on a lot of pressure and now leave up Spell Pierce. The shields were down on Spell Pierce last turn. Now Dwayne can leave it up for the rest of the game alongside his Force of Will and his Curse Catcher.
Yeah, talk about disruption. He's got, as you mentioned, that Spell Pierce. He's got Force of Will. He's got Curse Catcher. This is going to be a lot for Max to slog through, especially when he's at 1. Brown will draw a card. It's a Burning Wish.
And at 1, Max can't even do things anymore like sacrifice a fetch land or tap Ancient Tomb. I mean, these are critical lines. He can no longer alternate casting cost Force of Will. A lot of lines are being shut down right now.
And even though Island Walk in this matchup doesn't play a huge role, it's islands that Graham wants to be playing against with his Merfolk deck, because he does have a good matchup against island decks.
Yeah, it's challenging for Merfolks to beat decks that are flush with creature removal, Jund strategies, punishing fire strategies, what have you. But when you're playing against islands, whether it's out of control decks or combo decks, Merfolk generally has a pretty positive matchup.
So you see Brown is consulting his hand saying, what exactly happened here? I didn't lose with this deck at the last Invitational, but I've lost at this one. Max Brown extends the hand. Dwayne Graham, your tournament is off to a very nice start. He defeats the defending Invitational champion 2-0. Merfolk wins over Blue-Red Omnitel, and honestly, all things told, pretty easily, too.
Yeah, this is a matchup that Dwayne has to be pretty happy with. I think that his matchup is even better against the slower combo decks of Legacy.